Hey there, welcome back. Or if you're stumbling into this channel for the first time, congratulations. You've made it to one of the slower corners of the internet. A place where we quietly peel back the layers of dusty old history until you either fall asleep, question your will to survive in ancient times, or both. Tonight, we're leaving behind your soft mattress, your scented candles, and your refrigerator that keeps cheese from trying to kill you. We're heading straight into the grime-covered heart of the ancient Roman Empire, a place bursting with emperors, gladiators, orgies. Don't get excited. Public toilets. Definitely don't get excited. And enough lead poisoning to turn an entire civilization mildly deranged. But before we launch ourselves through time and land face first into a Roman alleyway filled with questionable puddles, take a second to get cozy. Dim your lights. Light a candle, preferably one that smells like vanilla and not fish sauce. Maybe grab a warm drink, ideally something that doesn't include fermented fish guts, because that's what's on the menu where we're going. And while you're at it, if you enjoy whisper-paced history and the soothing realization that modern life, for all its flaws, at least includes toilets with walls, go ahead and hit that like button. Maybe even subscribe, but only if you truly want it. No Roman-style conscription here. Now then, let's time travel. You wake up in the Roman Empire, specifically in the city of Rome itself. The year is 87 CE, during the reign of Emperor Domitian, an emperor best described as equal parts micromanaging bureaucrat and paranoid control freak with a flair for marble. You are not a senator. You are not a general. You are not even the guy who holds the general's horse. No. You're a common Roman citizen, born to common parents, and living a life so utterly average it would make beige jealous. You blink awake to the gentle sound of street vendors screaming about garum, the Romans' favorite condiment, which smells like anchovy armpit and is somehow in everything. Your head is resting on a pillow made of old rags. Your mattress is stuffed with straw, which sounds quaint until you remember that straw has the unfortunate tendency to attract bugs. Lots of them. There's no bed frame. Just the floor. Cold, cracked, and slightly damp. You share the room with your family, your cousin's family, an elderly neighbor who never seems to sleep and insists on humming during thunderstorms. The room itself is part of an insula, the Roman equivalent of an apartment complex, except with less concrete and more structural collapse. It's about 3 stories high, which is terrifying because these things were built with cheap wood, spit, and the illusion of safety. Fire is a constant threat. So is falling through the floorboards. And yes, both of those have actually happened to people you know. Probably last week. There is no kitchen. No bathroom. No windows unless you're on the top floor. And even then it's just a small hole that lets in smoke, screams, and the smell of donkey sweat. You eat, sleep, and survive in the same cramped space where a toddler is probably pooping into a clay pot. Your tunic, a one-size-fits-no-one piece of fabric, is your only outfit. It's itchy. It smells like yesterday's olive oil. And yes, you'll be wearing it again tomorrow. And the day after that. Laundry is for rich people and rainstorms. The first thing you notice, beyond the musty air and the whiff of garum in your mouth, even though you haven't eaten yet, is the noise. Rome doesn't do quiet. The streets are alive with the sounds of carts rumbling over uneven stones, merchants shouting over each other, dogs barking, and someone inevitably being arrested. You stretch your limbs, careful not to elbow anyone in the ribs, and shuffle to the doorway. The communal staircase, if you can call it that, is barely wide enough for one person, and it smells like something died there. It probably did. But nobody talks about it because it's not your turn to clean it. On your way down, you pass by a neighbor dumping a bucket of waste out the window. You hope no one's below. But honestly, that's just part of life. You step carefully to avoid puddles of unknown origin. Outside, the Roman sun is already high and hot. The smell intensifies. Think open sewage mixed with crushed grapes, ash from last night's fires, and the unmistakable tang of fishy death. There's no escaping it. You're not immune, you're just too tired to care. As you walk the street, it's impossible not to notice the sharp contrast between rich and poor. The senator's villa looms behind marble columns and thick iron gates. You, meanwhile, are wondering whether your roof will survive the next rainstorm or just give up and become a ceiling-shaped sponge. And yet, for all the grime, chaos, and questionable public health policies, Rome is alive. It hums. It pulses. There's energy here. Dangerous energy, maybe, but energy nonetheless. Your stomach growls, but food will come later. First, you have to relieve yourself. And let's just say, ancient Rome had toilets, just not the kind you want. But we'll get to that in segment 2. For now, just enjoy your first few minutes of the Roman commoner. You've survived this long. Barely. So, you've made it out of your overcrowded, bug-ridden apartment, stumbled down the creaking stairs, and emerged into the chaotic, goat-scented morning of ancient Rome. Congratulations. You're still breathing. Barely. Now comes the part of the morning no one likes to talk about, but everyone must face. Nature is calling. Loudly. And Rome? Rome answers in the most public way imaginable. There's no such thing as privacy here. No bathrooms tucked discreetly into the corners of coffee shops. No doors. No walls. No sense of personal space. Just one long marble slab with holes carved into it. It's called a latrina, and it's the Roman version of a public restroom, if public meant you and 15 strangers making eye contact while squatting over a hole. Let's set the scene. You find your local latrina behind a bathhouse, near the forum, or maybe nestled between two shops that sell suspicious meat on sticks. It's a long stone bench with evenly spaced openings. Underneath, a continuous flow of water carries everything away. Ideally, you sit, or try to. The stone is cold. So cold it makes your spine regret being alive. There's no toilet paper. Of course not. That won't exist for over 1,000 years. Instead, you get the Roman solution, the tersorium. A communal sponge on a stick. Yes, communal. As in shared. As in everyone uses the same one. It's stored in a bucket of vinegar or salt water, and after each use, you dip it back in. There's a vague hope that this does something to sanitize it. The science is unclear. But in ancient Rome, the bar for cleanliness is already so low it's buried under a collapsed aqueduct. Now let's talk hygiene. Your hands. You wipe them on your tunic. The same one you sleep in. The same one you eat in. The same one that already smells like yesterday's fish stew and regret. The latrina, like most public Roman spaces, is a hub of conversation. People gossip, argue, even seal business deals while relieving themselves. You try not to listen, but it's hard when the man next to you is passionately describing his cousin's foot fungus while gesturing with both hands. When you're finally done, you exit feeling not cleaner, but at least lighter. You try not to think about what just happened. You try not to make eye contact with the sponge. And you try not to gag when a child skips and holding a crust of bread. You step back into the street, where the sounds of daily life are already in full swing. Bakers shouting about their barley loaves, chariots rattling across uneven stones, and somewhere in the distance, a man yelling fresh garum, like it's a blessing instead of a curse. Now it's time for breakfast, or as the Romans call it, intaculum. Sounds fancy. It isn't. Breakfast is not a luxurious spread. It's not a croissant. It's not eggs Benedict. It's not even cereal with questionable mascots on the box. It's bread. Stale bread. Hard as ambition, cracked as the forum stones, and sometimes flavored with a thin smear of olive paste, if you're lucky. If you're not, just the bread. You gnaw on it like a rat working its way through a roof beam, slowly regretting everything. You wash it down with pasca, a delightful little beverage made from water, vinegar, and possibly disappointment. It tastes like gym socks soaked in lemon juice and makes your teeth feel like they're trying to retreat into your gums. The upper class, of course, eats differently. They might have figs, cheese, honey, and the occasional egg. But you're a pleb, a commoner. You eat what you can afford, and you pretend it's delicious because that's the Roman way, stoicism with a side of sadness. Now that your stomach is partially full and your dignity is partially intact, it's time for the next task on your Roman morning checklist, washing up. Except there's a catch. You don't have a bathroom. You don't even have a sink. If you're lucky, there's a public fountain nearby, fed by the glorious aqueducts Rome is so famous for. But don't be fooled. That water may be flowing from the mountains, but it's shared by every citizen, dog, and bird in the district. You splash your face. It's freezing. It wakes you up better than coffee, which doesn't exist yet, tragically. You rub your eyes, your hands, and maybe rinse your armpits if no one's watching too closely. So, try olive oil, some fine sand, and the hope that grime counts as character. Your teeth, meanwhile, are on their own. Toothpaste isn't invented. Toothbrushes? Unheard of. If you're feeling fancy, you might rub your gums with ashes or salt. If not, you just chew on a twig and call it a day. You consider changing your tunic, but you only own one. So you pull the wrinkles flat with your hands, shrug, and pretend that's fashion. The streets around you are growing busier. The sun has climbed a little higher, casting long, dusty rays over the forum. People hurry past you in every direction. Senators in spotless white togas, merchants with carts full of fabric and wine, beggars shaking wooden bowls, children darting through crowds, laughing, stealing figs. Everything smells stronger now. More heat, more sweat, more city. A dead fish rots in a gutter. Someone nearby yells about a political scandal involving a temple prostitute and a goat. You decide not to investigate. A street performer juggles clay pots while shouting poetry about Mars, the god of war, and nearly drops one on your foot. You nod politely. He hisses something in Latin that may or may not be a compliment. You're fully immersed now. This is Rome. Alive, unfiltered, and utterly exhausting. And you haven't even started your workday yet. In the next segment, we'll talk about Roman labor. Whether you're a bricklayer, a baker, or a fishmonger named Publius, you're about to experience a full day of backbreaking effort with very little reward and no workers' union. But for now, take a deep breath. Let the smell of ancient fish sauce and donkey sweat fill your lungs. You survived your first Roman morning. Barely. So, you've survived this sponge. You've eaten something vaguely bread-like. You've washed your face in water that smells a bit like old copper coins and slightly like feet. Now comes the part of your Roman day that will truly test your strength, your endurance, and your ability to suppress tears without modern HR departments work. And no, you're not a senator. You're not Cicero giving lofty speeches in the forum. You're not reclining in a silk-draped villa eating peeled grapes, handed to you by a well-trained servant named Cassius. You're not a poet, a philosopher, or an aristocrat with delicate hands that haven't touched anything heavier than a scroll in 5 years. You're a plebeian. You work. Let's say you're a bricklayer. You and a dozen other men gather at dawn on a construction site with no safety rails, no blueprints, and no union rep. Your tools are basic: wooden scaffolds, clay buckets, bronze hammers that have seen better decades. Your hands, calloused, cracked, permanently dusty. Your shoulders, ruined. Your pay, barely enough to afford stale bread and cheap wine. And your supervisor, probably a man named Gaius, is yelling in Latin because someone dropped a brick on his foot again. You spend the day hauling stones the size of your soul, mixing lime mortar that burns your skin, and hoping the scaffolding holds this time. You don't have gloves. You don't have boots. You don't have lunch, just a chunk of cheese in your pouch that's sweating harder than you are. If it rains, the site floods. If it's hot, you bake. If you fall, you hope you die instantly, because Roman medicine is basically wine, prayers, and the occasional application of crushed herbs by someone who once watched a goat give birth. Or maybe you're a baker. Sounds cushy, right? You wake up before the sun and walk to the communal bakery where the oven's already roasting. The air inside is thick with heat and flour and a kind of sweat that doesn't quite smell human anymore. You spend the day mixing grain that may or may not include bits of sand, because the millstone grinds everything, including small rocks. Your bread is sold to locals who have zero idea they're slowly grinding down their teeth one bite at a time. You get burned. You get yelled at. You get flour in every crevice of your body. And if the bread's too hard or too soft or smells slightly weird, someone threatens to report you to the city officials. Which brings you one step closer to losing your job and starving. But let's say you're not even that lucky. Let's say you're unemployed. Rome has unemployment. It's just not called that. You don't get benefits. You don't get training programs. You get one thing, a long line for the grain dole, the Roman welfare system that hands out rations to citizens in need. You line up with hundreds of others under the hot sun, shuffling forward as guards shout and push you like sacks of olives. You receive a scoop of grain and maybe a bit of oil, if they haven't run out. Then you go home and try to make something edible out of it. Usually you fail, but you eat it anyway. Because hunger doesn't care how creative your cooking is. And if you're a woman, the work doesn't stop and it doesn't pay. Maybe you're married. Your day starts before sunrise. You grind grain by hand using a heavy stone mortar until your arms feel like rope. You fetch water from the nearest fountain. You sweep the floor, which is always dusty because Roman streets don't believe in staying outside where they belong. You cook. You clean. You watch the children. You prepare food. You patch clothes. You mend sandals. You try not to faint from exhaustion, dehydration, or sheer existential dread. If you're widowed or single, good luck. You're vulnerable. You're suspicious. You're either selling something on the street, figs, fabric, or your own dignity, or you're trying to avoid being noticed by men with too much wine and not enough boundaries. Some women become midwives or healers, using passed-down herbal knowledge to help others. But if you're too outspoken or too skilled, the whispers start. She knows too much. She's unnatural. She's maybe a witch. And suddenly, the thing that made you useful becomes a reason to fear you. Meanwhile, Rome's elites are not working. At least not the way you are. The patricians, the upper class, the ones who wear bright white togas and walk like the street stinks a little less for them. They spend their mornings hosting philosophical debates, managing estates, or supervising while someone else does the actual labor. They visit the forum. They visit the bathhouse. They might pen a letter. They might attend a trial. They might recite some poetry. It's exhausting, really being decorative. You, on the other hand, are covered in dust, sweat, and possibly goat hair. You can't feel your back anymore. And it's only noon. By now, your knees ache from standing. Your shoulders feel like you've been arm wrestling Minerva. Your stomach is grumbling again, even though the only thing it got earlier was disappointment served on stale bread. You reach for your lunch, a small cloth bundle with a hard-boiled egg if you're lucky, a piece of fruit if it wasn't stepped on, and more bread. Always bread. You sit wherever you can, on a step, on a pile of bricks, in a quiet alley. There's no cafe, no break room, just you in the city, roaring around you like a beast with no intention of letting you rest. Still, you push through, because there is no other option. Rome isn't a place that waits for you to catch your breath. Rome demands. Rome expects. Rome breaks your body and shrugs. And if you fall behind, if you get injured, if you grow too old to lift or scrub or hammer, there's no pension. No golden years. You fade into the background, forgotten as easily as a broken amphora. By the time the sun starts to dip, your legs are trembling. You smell like sweat, dust, and survival. But you did it. You worked a Roman day. You earned just enough to keep existing tomorrow. And honestly, that's the best anyone can hope for here. In the next segment, we'll dive into entertainment, which in ancient Rome includes lions, blood, vomitoriums, and absolutely no personal boundaries. But for now, rest your back. You've earned it. So you've worked all morning, your back is screaming, your knees are plotting revenge, and your stomach is trying to digest bread that doubles as a weapon. But the day isn't over. Because it's Rome. And Rome doesn't stop. After a long shift building walls, baking bread, or carrying amphorae that weigh more than your will to live, you need some kind of relief. You need entertainment. But this isn't Netflix and chill. This is Rome and kill. Let's begin with the crown jewel of Roman spectacle, the Colosseum. Officially called the Flavian Amphitheater, it sits like a gaping stone mouth in the heart of the city, waiting to be filled with 50,000 cheering Romans, all hungry for one thing, violence. You squeeze into a seat, not that you have one. You're in the upper tiers with the rest of the commoners. It's a stone step. Your legs cramp immediately. There are no cushions. No backrest. Just a crowd of sweaty bodies and the distant whiff of sausage grease and blood. Below you, in the arena, men prepare to fight to the death. Gladiators. Some are slaves. Some are criminals. Some actually volunteered because, frankly, being a gladiator sometimes beats being a bricklayer with back pain and no legacy. They're not just brutes. They're trained warriors. Some even have fan clubs. Graffiti scrawled on alley walls proclaims things like, Marcus the Thrasher, 14 wins, 3 decapitations, 1 broken heart. They wear helmets so heavy they can barely see, armor so sparse it's basically a fashion statement, and weapons that range from swords to tridents to nets with weighted ends. Yes, nets. Someone's job is to be the fisherman of doom. The gates open. The crowd roars. The gladiators charge. And the blood begins to flow. Sometimes it's not even man versus man. Sometimes it's man versus beast. Tigers from Asia, lions from North Africa, bears from the mountains, elephants, crocodiles, even ostriches, because why not? The Romans imported entire zoos just to watch them die. These events are called venations, wild beast hunts, and they're not just about killing animals. They're about dominating nature. Rome wasn't content to conquer people. It had to conquer everything. And if you're wondering where the animals stayed before showtime, the answer is underground. Beneath the Colosseum lies a labyrinth of cages, elevators, and trapdoors. Creatures are raised up into the arena suddenly, like murderous party favors. Sometimes the animals win. The crowd loves that too. And then there are the executions. Yes, executions as public entertainment. Criminals, real or imagined, are marched into the arena and given a chance to survive. Spoiler, they won't. Some are tied to stakes and mauled by animals. Some are forced to fight each other with no training. Some are made into theatrical acts, like being crucified as part of a reenactment of a myth. The line between drama and death is basically non-existent. And the crowd? They eat it up like olives at a dinner party. There's no horror, no hesitation, just cheers, laughter, and the occasional chant of "finish him" in Latin. You start to realize that Roman entertainment is less about escape and more about reminding everyone who's in charge. But let's say you're not in the mood for blood today. Let's say you want something lighter, something cultural, something theatrical. You make your way to the theater of Pompey, Rome's grand performance space. It's beautiful, echoing with voices and sandals and the smell of old wine. You sit again on a stone bench. Comfort has fled the empire long ago. The play begins. The actors wear masks, and their lines echo dramatically across the open air. There's music. There's comedy. There's tragedy. Occasionally there's nudity, because Romans weren't subtle. And yes, the actors are all men, even the ones playing women. It's awkward. But you pretend it's art. Now, if you're lucky, or if you're a wealthy Roman with a death wish for cholesterol, you might receive an invitation to a dinner party. These convivia are legendary. Think long couches, endless wine, and enough roasted animals to populate a farm. You recline on your left elbow like you read in a scroll once, and hope your stomach doesn't revolt. There's music, acrobats, poetry readings, and the occasional guest vomiting discreetly into a bucket so they can keep eating. That's not a joke. That's a Tuesday. And the food? Everything from stuffed dormice to peacock tongues to boiled sow's udders filled with honey and nuts. It sounds fancy. It tastes challenging. And it's all served with garum because Romans put fish sauce on everything. Even dessert. You try to be polite. You try to keep it down. You fail at both. But what if you're not in the Colosseum? Or the theater? Or reclining awkwardly at a banquet? Well then, you're probably at the public baths, Rome's great equalizer. Everyone from senators to slaves bathes together, naked, in a steamy labyrinth of pools, steam rooms, and heated floors. You sweat. You scrub. You listen to gossip. You pretend you're relaxed while wondering what that floating thing is. You hire a strigil, a guy who scrapes your body with a curved metal tool to remove oil and dirt. It sounds gross. It is. But afterward, you feel slightly less disgusting, and that's a win. The bathhouse is loud, hot, wet, and mildly chaotic, but it's cleaner than your apartment, and no one's throwing wild animals at you. So it's practically a vacation. And honestly, that's the best anyone can hope for here. In the next segment, we'll dive into entertainment, which in ancient Rome includes lions, blood, vomitoriums, and absolutely no personal boundaries. But for now, rest your back. You've earned it. So you've worked all morning, your back is screaming, your knees are plotting revenge, and your stomach is trying to digest bread that doubles as a weapon. But the day isn't over. Because it's Rome. And Rome doesn't stop. After a long shift building walls, baking bread, or carrying amphorae that weigh more than your will to live, you need some kind of relief. You need entertainment. But this isn't Netflix and chill. This is Rome and kill. Let's begin with the crown jewel of Roman spectacle, the Colosseum. Officially called the Flavian Amphitheater, it sits like a gaping stone mouth in the heart of the city, waiting to be filled with 50,000 cheering Romans, all hungry for one thing: violence. You squeeze into a seat, not that you have one. You're in the upper tiers with the rest of the commoners. It's a stone step. Your legs cramp immediately. There are no cushions, no backrest. Just a crowd of sweaty bodies and the distant whiff of sausage grease and blood. Below you, in the arena, men prepare to fight to the death. Gladiators. Some are slaves. Some are criminals. Some actually volunteered because, frankly, being a gladiator sometimes beats being a bricklayer with back pain and no legacy. They're not just brutes. They're trained warriors. Some even have fan clubs. Graffiti scrawled on alley walls proclaims things like, Marcus the Thrasher, 14 wins, 3 decapitations, 1 broken heart. They wear helmets so heavy they can barely see, armor so sparse it's basically a fashion statement, and weapons that range from swords to tridents to nets with weighted ends. Yes, nets. Someone's job is to be the fisherman of doom. The gates open. The crowd roars. The gladiators charge. And the blood begins to flow. Sometimes it's not even man versus man. Sometimes it's man versus beast. Tigers from Asia. Lions from North Africa. Bears from the mountains. Elephants, crocodiles, even ostriches. Because why not? The Romans imported entire zoos just to watch them die. These events are called venations, wild beast hunts, and they're not just about killing animals. They're about dominating nature. Rome wasn't content to conquer people. It had to conquer everything. And if you're wondering where the animals stayed before showtime, the answer is underground. Beneath the Colosseum lies a labyrinth of cages, elevators, and trapdoors. Creatures are raised up into the arena suddenly, like murderous party favors. Sometimes the animals win. The crowd loves that too. And then there are the executions. Yes, executions as public entertainment. Criminals, real or imagined, are marched into the arena and given a chance to survive. Spoiler, they won't. Some are tied to stakes and mauled by animals. Some are forced to fight each other with no training. Some are made into theatrical acts, like being crucified as part of a reenactment of a myth. The line between drama and death is basically non-existent. And the crowd? They eat it up like olives at a dinner party. There's no horror, no hesitation. Just cheers, laughter, and the occasional chant of "finish him" in Latin. You start to realize that Roman entertainment is less about escape and more about reminding everyone who's in charge. But let's say you're not in the mood for blood today. Let's say you want something lighter, something cultural, something theatrical. You make your way to the theater of Pompey, Rome's grand performance space. It's beautiful, echoing with voices and sandals and the smell of old wine. You sit again on a stone bench. Comfort has fled the empire long ago. The play begins. The actors wear masks, and their lines echo dramatically across the open air. There's music. There's comedy. There's tragedy. Occasionally there's nudity, because Romans weren't subtle. And yes, the actors are all men, even the ones playing women. It's awkward. But you pretend it's art. Now, if you're lucky, or if you're a wealthy Roman with a death wish for cholesterol, you might receive an invitation to a dinner party. These convivia are legendary. Think long couches, endless wine, and enough roasted animals to populate a farm. You recline on your left elbow like you read in a scroll once, and hope your stomach doesn't revolt. There's music, acrobats, poetry readings, and the occasional guest vomiting discreetly into a bucket so they can keep eating. That's not a joke. That's a Tuesday. And the food? Everything from stuffed dormice to peacock tongues to boiled sow's udders filled with honey and nuts. It sounds fancy. It tastes challenging. And it's all served with garum because Romans put fish sauce on everything. Even dessert. You try to be polite. You try to keep it down. You fail at both. But what if you're not in the Colosseum? Or the theater? Or reclining awkwardly at a banquet? Well then, you're probably at the public baths, Rome's great equalizer. Everyone from senators to slaves bathes together, naked, in a steamy labyrinth of pools, steam rooms, and heated floors. You sweat. You scrub. You listen to gossip. You pretend you're relaxed while wondering what that floating thing is. You hire a strigil, a guy who scrapes your body with a curved metal tool to remove oil and dirt. It sounds gross. It is. But afterward, you feel slightly less disgusting, and that's a win. The bathhouse is loud, hot, wet, and mildly chaotic. But it's cleaner than your apartment. And no one's throwing wild animals at you. So it's practically a vacation. As the sun finally begins to set, Rome exhales. The shadows grow longer, the crowds thin, and torches are lit along the streets. You walk home slowly, your sandals flapping, your stomach full of vinegar and questionable meat, your mind spinning from everything you've seen. The city never really sleeps. There's always someone arguing, eating, drinking, or shouting about Jupiter's lightning. But for now, you've seen the best and worst of Rome's entertainment. You've watched men die for sport. You've cheered with a mob. You've gagged on fish sauce and survived a poetry reading. And somehow, you're still standing. Barely. In the next segment, we'll explore what Romans believed in gods, ghosts, curses, omens, and the kind of superstitions that make knocking on wood look like child's play. But for now, close your eyes, breathe slowly, and thank whatever deity is listening that you don't live in ancient Rome yet. So, you've survived the sponge, the gladiators, the fish sauce, and the bread that could chip a tooth. You're sunburnt, blistered, and possibly still digesting something that looked suspiciously like a boiled goat tongue. But now, let's talk about what really kept the average Roman up at night. Not just debt, not taxes, not the smell of their neighbor's fermented cabbage stew. No. What truly haunted the Roman mind was something far older and more slippery. A heavy, invisible fog that blanketed every decision, every step, every sneeze. That fog? Superstition. Because to live in ancient Rome was to be surrounded by gods, ghosts, omens, curses, portents, signs from birds, whispers from bones, and the ever-present feeling that something, somewhere, was definitely out to get you. Let's begin with the gods. There wasn't just one. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. Honestly, no one kept count. You had Jupiter, the king of the gods, who could throw lightning bolts when he was cranky. You had Juno, queen of the gods, protector of marriage and world-class grudge holder. You had Mars, god of war, Venus, goddess of love, Neptune for the sea, Pluto for the underworld, Bacchus for parties, Vesta for the hearth, and Mercury for quick deliveries and lies. And if those weren't enough, every tree, rock, spring, and moldy corner of your home probably had a local spirit assigned to it. The Romans called them genii, lares, and penates, guardian spirits that protected your household, your food, your ancestors, and possibly your sock drawer. Every Roman home had a shrine, called a lararium, where you left daily offerings. A crust of bread here, a splash of wine there. If you forgot, bad things happened. Mysterious illnesses, failed crops, sudden gout, your goat refusing to produce milk. Coincidence? Absolutely not. The spirits were offended. And then there were the omens. Romans believed the universe was constantly whispering to them. You just had to know how to listen. A bird flew to your left? Bad omen. A bird flew to your right? Good omen. A bird pooped on your toga? Unclear. Probably depends on the bird. There were entire jobs built around watching birds. These professionals were called augurs, and their job was to interpret the will of the gods by observing animal behavior. Specifically birds, but sometimes chickens. Yes, chickens. In fact, before a major military campaign, Roman generals would consult sacred chickens. If the chickens refused to eat, it was a sign the gods disapproved. If the chickens did eat, it meant full speed ahead, death, glory, and poultry-approved warfare. One story even tells of a Roman commander who got so annoyed that the chickens wouldn't eat that he threw them into the sea and said, "If they won't eat, let them drink." He lost the battle. Obviously. Now, if birds weren't whispering secrets, the entrails of sacrificed animals probably were. This was called haruspicy, a sacred art of examining livers, kidneys, and various squishy bits to determine whether the gods were pleased. A priest would slit open a goat or a bull, reach in, and start analyzing. Was the liver a nice color? Good. Was it weirdly shaped? Oh. Was there a cyst? Probably a plague coming. It sounds ridiculous now, but in Rome, these inspections were taken seriously. Like empire changing seriously. No temple was built, no war was waged, no marriage was blessed until some poor animal's gut said it was okay. Now let's talk curses. Romans were obsessed with them. And honestly, who could blame them? Life was hard. Work was harder. And if someone stole your loaf of bread or gave you the evil eye, you didn't exactly have legal recourse. What you did have was a lead tablet and a vengeful heart. These were called defixtions, small curse tablets, usually made of lead, scratched with the name of the person you wanted to suffer and the specific fate you had in mind. May Publius lose all his hair and smell like a dead eel. May Lucia's teeth rot one by one until she speaks only in whistles. May Gaius never win at dice again, and may his tunic fall off during important speeches. These tablets were often thrown into wells, nailed to temple walls, or buried in graves, especially in tombs, where ghosts could help deliver the message. Because, yes, The Romans believed in ghosts. They called them lemurs and larvae, not the cute butterfly kind, but restless spirits of the dead who hadn't been buried properly or who had unresolved issues, like being murdered or forgotten. Romans feared them so much they had a special holiday just for ghost prevention, Lemuria. Every May, families would perform nighttime rituals to banish these spirits. You'd walk barefoot through your house at midnight, throw black beans over your shoulder, and chant, "With these beans, I redeem me and mine." Then you'd clang bronze pots to make as much noise as possible, just in case any ghosts missed the memo. It's basically a Roman version of yelling, "Go away," while throwing trail mix at your problems. And if all that wasn't enough, there were the magicians, sorceresses, and diviners who promised to solve your problems for a price. Need a love spell? They had herbs for that. Need revenge? They had poisons. Need to talk to a dead uncle about that cursed amulet he left in the attic? There was a woman in the Subura who knew someone who knew someone. Magic was technically illegal in Rome, but only if it worked, which meant everyone did it, but no one admitted to it, like karaoke or pineapple on pizza. Even the emperors weren't immune. Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, was known to carry a sealed tooth for protection. He avoided certain days for official business because they were considered unlucky, and he had his house purified by priests after a lightning strike, just in case Jupiter was trying to send him a supernatural eviction notice. Domitian, the emperor during our 87 CE timeline, was so terrified of being assassinated that he lined his halls with mirrors to watch people behind him, and wouldn't sit in a room without a hidden escape route. He was still assassinated. The mirrors didn't help. So if you're living in ancient Rome, you're not just battling hunger, exhaustion, and the vague threat of collapsing masonry. You're also dodging curses, appeasing angry ancestors, counting birds, and hoping the chicken agrees with your life choices. Every action is laced with meaning. Every sneeze might be a warning. Every shadow might be a spirit. It's exhausting, which makes it the perfect time to end today's walk through the Roman spiritual minefield. In the next segment, we'll talk about health and medicine, which in ancient Rome involved questionable doctors, bloodletting, and surgical tools that look more like torture devices. But for now, throw some beans over your shoulder, whisper an apology to your house gods, and try to sleep without angering the ghost in the corner. You're doing great. Barely. You made it through the day. Sort of. You sat in a public toilet. You dodged a curse. You watched two men try to decapitate each other while the crowd cheered and someone offered you a suspicious sausage. And now your head hurts, your back feels like it belongs to a 200-year-old tortoise, and your stomach is making noises that sound like an ancient god trying to claw its way out. Welcome to Roman medicine, where healing is optional, pain is normal, and your doctor might also be your local barber. Let's set the stage. In ancient Rome, medicine wasn't what you think. There are no white coats, no stethoscopes, no softly humming hospital lights or beeping machines. Instead, there's Gaius, a man in a dirty tunic who claims he once studied under a Greek physician, or at least read about one on a scroll that fell off a cart. He smells like vinegar and goat. He carries a bag of bronze tools that look more like instruments of war than instruments of healing. And he's about to fix you. Probably. Your first mistake? Telling someone you don't feel well. Because now it's out in the open. Now the gods know. Now your neighbors know. And now Gaius has been summoned, dragging his sack of clanking tools like a cat proudly returning with a half-dead mouse. Let's say you've got a headache. Just a simple pounding headache from dehydration, lack of sleep, and spending 3 hours sitting on marble watching lions eat people. To you, this feels manageable. To Gaius, this is a disturbance of the humors. Ah yes, the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. According to Roman medical theory, everything in your body, health, mood, function, is controlled by the balance of these 4 mysterious fluids. Too much blood? You're feverish. Too much phlegm? You're sluggish. Too much yellow bile? You're angry. Too much black bile? You're melancholy. And your headache? Clearly, it's your humors having a domestic dispute in your skull. The solution? Bloodletting. Bloodletting is exactly what it sounds like, cutting open a vein and letting some blood out to restore balance. You lie down on a splintery bench while Gaius selects a blade that looks like it was last cleaned during the reign of Romulus. He mutters something about Jupiter, squints at your arm, and opens a vein. No gloves. No disinfectant. No anesthesia. You bleed into a clay bowl. Gaius watches thoughtfully. He nods, as if the blood's texture is giving him useful information. You feel dizzy. He says, that means it's working. You pass out. He considers that a full recovery. But what if your ailment is deeper? What if you're coughing, wheezing, your chest is tight, your throat is sore? You might have pneumonia, or tuberculosis, or maybe you just inhaled too much amphora dust. Gaius has a cure for that too. It involves a poultice of crushed onions, honey, and pig fat spread on your chest like an aggressive sandwich. He ties it down with linen and tells you not to move, or cough, or breathe too hard. You're also advised to drink a herbal tonic made from fennel, myrrh, and a tiny amount of urine. Not animal urine, your own. Because according to some Roman medical texts, urine had cleansing properties. You sip it. You gag. Gaius nods again. Very good, he says. You contemplate the sweetness of death. Now let's talk about surgery. Yes, Romans performed surgery. No, it was not relaxing. There were no hospitals like we know today. Most surgeries happen in homes, marketplaces, or near temples, often on stone slabs and often without anyone nearby who actually knew what they were doing. Anesthetics. You had 2 options, wine or opium. Not both. That was considered indulgent. You're given a strong drink, asked to bite down on a stick, and then Gaius gets to work with a tool that resembles a corkscrew crossed with a torture device. Broken bone. He might try to set it with wooden splints and prayers. Infected wound. He'll cauterize it, meaning he heats a piece of metal until it glows and then presses it directly onto your skin. The smell. Burned meat. Your meat. The sound. Screaming. Yours. The outcome. You either live, or you become an offering to the gods of infection and poor choices. And don't even ask about dentistry. Roman dental care was brutal, rare, and mostly improvised. Toothache? Gaius will pull the tooth out. No numbing. No floss. Just brute force and a chisel. Cavities? There's no drilling, no filling. Just let's see how long this lasts before your jaw falls off. If you're wealthy, you might afford a gold cap or some false teeth made from ivory or bone. But for most Romans, your dental plan is wait until it falls out, then adapt your diet to suit. Pregnancy and childbirth. You'd be better off consulting the gods directly. Midwives existed, and some were experienced, skilled, even revered. But the tools were primitive, the risks were high, and maternal mortality was tragically common. Painkillers were rare. Knowledge of anatomy was sketchy. Complications like breech births or hemorrhaging had no solutions, just whispered prayers and a hope that someone was listening. And yet, somehow the Roman Empire marched on. Now, you might be wondering, didn't the Romans have real doctors? Yes, kind of. The most famous was Galen, a Greek physician who became the go-to doctor for gladiators and emperors alike. He wrote volumes of medical texts. He dissected animals. He guessed, tested, and theorized more than most. But even Galen believed in humors. Even Galen used leeches. And even Galen treated mental illness with bloodletting and cold baths. Because in ancient Rome, mental health wasn't a recognized concept. If you acted strangely, you were either possessed, cursed, or in desperate need of a walk around the garden. So if you're in pain, headache, toothache, mystery rash, existential dread, there's only one real option. Deal with it. Walk it off. Rub garlic on it. Drink wine. Pray to Apollo. Sniff some sulfur. Hope for the best. Because Roman medicine wasn't about making you feel good. It was about surviving long enough to maybe feel less bad. In the next segment, we'll look at what Romans ate, from roasted dormice to fermented sauces to wine that tastes like vinegar left in the sun. But for now, lie very still. Drink some herbal tea. Don't let Gaius near you. And thank the gods that you were born in the era of antibiotics and band-aids. You're surviving. Barely. So, you fought through bloodletting, sponge sharing, and possibly a ghost that lives in your latrine. Your back is broken, your sandals are disintegrating, and your mouth still tastes like wine and regret. Now you're hungry, which, in ancient Rome, is both an opportunity and a threat. Let's talk about food. What the Romans ate, how they prepared it, and why every meal was either a luxury or a gastrointestinal gamble. First things first, you are not rich, so forget the banquets. Forget the silver trays and reclining on marble couches while someone peels grapes directly into your mouth. You're a commoner. Pleb. Your dining setup is closer to squat on a crate and hope no rats show up than feast of the gods. And your food? Let's start with bread. Because in Rome, bread isn't just food. It's life. It's currency. It's probably the only reason you're still standing. But don't picture fresh, warm loaves from a rustic countryside bakery. No, your bread is hard, dense, rough. It was baked in a communal oven, possibly yesterday, maybe last week, and it contains small bits of grit because Roman millstones grind everything, including stone. You bite into it carefully, very carefully, because if you're not, it might break a tooth. And if that happens, well, we've already covered Roman dentistry in the last segment. Alongside your bread, you might enjoy some pottage. What is pottage? It's a thick, gloopy stew made from grains, legumes, and whatever root vegetables are still edible this week. Lentils, onions, barley, maybe a carrot if you're lucky, or at least something vaguely orange. It's been simmering for hours, or days, or possibly weeks. There's no refrigeration, so new ingredients are just dumped on top of the old ones. Like a stew-based archaeological site. It doesn't taste good, but it's warm. It's filling, and it hasn't tried to escape the bowl yet, so we take that as a win. Now let's talk about protein. You don't get a lot of it. Meat is expensive. Reserved for feast days, religious festivals, or when someone's goat dies unexpectedly and nobody asks questions. But when you do get meat, it's often heavily salted, dried, or already questionable by modern standards. Sometimes you don't even know what it is. Pork? Maybe. Rat? Possible. Mystery bird? Frequently. And if you're dining with the upper class, by invitation or bribe or sheer accident, you might encounter a truly Roman delicacy. Roasted dormouse. Yes, a mouse, but fatter and fancier. These little rodents were raised in special clay jars called glararia, force-fed until plump, then stuffed with minced meat, herbs, and nuts and roasted. It's a status symbol, a snack, a conversation starter. To you, it's also deeply upsetting. You chew politely. You smile. You cry inside. Now for the real star of the Roman dinner table. The ingredient that haunts every dish. The ketchup of the empire. The mayonnaise of the Mediterranean. The dark, salty, liquid heart of Roman cuisine. Garum. Garum is a fermented fish sauce, made by layering fish guts and salt in jars, leaving them in the sun for several weeks or months until they liquefy into a pungent amber-colored sludge. That sludge is then filtered, bottled, and sold across the empire like it's liquid gold. Romans put it on everything. Bread, stew, meat, fruit. Yes, fruit. Garum isn't just a condiment. It's a way of life. And yes, it smells like old socks dipped in the ocean and forgotten in a tomb. But to a Roman, it's delicious. It's umami. It's essential. You gag a little. They call you uncultured. ETs, take a moment to consider your drink options. Water? Questionable. Roman water sources were impressive. Those aqueducts are architectural wonders, but the actual quality? Debatable. Especially in cities where public baths, animal markets, and waste disposal all mix in one glorious ancient soup. So instead of water, most Romans drink wine. But not just any wine. Watered down, sour wine. Sometimes spiced. Sometimes heated. Sometimes with additives like chalk, resin, or even lead, depending on the vendor's creativity and disregard for your internal organs. Rich people drink aged wine. Poor people drink wine that tastes like it's still fermenting in the sun. Everyone pretends it's fine, and it is until the lead poisoning kicks in. But that's a problem for future you. Present you is just trying to stay hydrated without growing a third arm. Now, let's say you've been invited to a feast, a proper Roman banquet. You don't belong here, but you got lucky. Someone mistook you for a cousin of a senator, or maybe you're here to refill wine cups, and no one noticed you sat down. This is your chance to eat like the elite. And it's overwhelming. The food is strange, excessive, performative. They're serving boiled sow's udders stuffed with peppered nuts, oysters with honey, peacock eggs, and a pie that, when sliced open, releases live birds, because Romans love a little showmanship with their indigestion. The host smiles proudly. You smile back, try not to look terrified. You pick at your plate. It wobbles. It moves. You fake a cough. Someone offers you a spoonful of honey-roasted locusts. You decline, politely. Then comes dessert. And what is dessert? Fruit. Sometimes dried. Sometimes soaked in wine. Sometimes candied. Sometimes hiding more garum. You chew slowly. Your stomach sighs. Afterwards, the guests recline on couches, burp openly, and discuss philosophy, politics, or gossip about who vomited between courses. Because, yes, vomiting was normal. Not for health reasons. Not bulimia. Just to make room for more food. Some Roman homes had special rooms for it. Vomit rooms. They were called vomitoria, which doesn't actually mean what most people think, but the misunderstanding is close enough to be tragic. And no one thinks it's weird. It's just dinner. It's just Rome. At the end of it all, you stumble home. You're full, but also not okay. You feel like you've eaten history, shame, and a mild poison all in one sitting. Your breath smells like fish. Your fingers are sticky. Your stomach is having a spiritual crisis. But hey, you've survived another Roman meal. Barely. In the next segment, we'll step into the daily grind of survival. How Romans bathed, clothed themselves, did laundry, and tried not to collapse under the weight of clay pots and unreasonable expectations. But for now, sip some vinegar wine. Nibble on a stale steak. Try not to dream about fermented mice. You're doing just fine. Almost. So you've survived another Roman meal, and your stomach is still negotiating terms of peace with the fermented fish sauce you now regret calling kind of okay. You're sticky, sweaty, and lightly coated in the remains of something you hope was a fig. Congratulations. You are now due for one of Rome's most treasured daily rituals, the public bath. But this isn't a spa. It's not a retreat. It's not scented candles and eucalyptus towels. It's social obligation. It's hygiene by way of chaos. It's steam, sweat, sandals, and strangers. Lots of strangers. Let's begin. The Roman bathhouse, or thermae, is a bustling hub of activity. It's loud. It's crowded. It smells like wet marble, olive oil, and too many people who skipped yesterday. There are echoes of laughter, arguments, splashing, and someone yelling about missing sandals. You pay a small entry fee, unless it's a festival day or someone rich is sponsoring free entry to boost their popularity. In that case, you just walk in, which is good because you spent your last coin on garum-covered bread you couldn't finish. You step into the apoditerium, the changing room. It's not private. There are no curtains, no lockers. You strip down in front of everyone and hand your belongings to an attendant who definitely has no official training and might definitely not return them later. You try to act casual while covering parts of yourself that haven't seen the sun since Nero was a child. You follow the flow of mostly naked men and women in separate facilities, unless someone rich paid for a co-ed bath day, in which case, good luck. Now comes the process. First, the tepidarium, the warm room. This is where you start to sweat. The walls are damp. The benches are stone. The air is heavy and humid and vaguely smells like moldy lavender and ambition. You sit quietly, adjusting to the warmth while eavesdropping on political gossip, sports arguments, or someone loudly reciting bad poetry. Then, when you're glistening like an overripe olive, you head to the next stage, the caldarium, the hot room. This is the Roman sauna. It's heated by a hypocaust system, essentially a raised floor with a fire blazing underneath. The walls sweat. The ceiling drips. Your hair curls. Your tunic would melt, but you're not wearing one anymore. You sit beside strangers, pretend not to notice their back hair, and breathe steam so thick it feels like drinking a warm sponge. A slave brings a bucket of hot water and pours it over you without warning. You yelp. They shrug. Then comes the scraping. A strigil, a curved metal tool, is used to remove sweat, oil, and dirt from your skin. Think of it as ancient exfoliation, if exfoliation involved minor assault and public nudity. The strigil feels cold, then sharp, then somehow judgmental. You are now smoother, but also vaguely bruised. Finally, you cool off in the frigidarium, the cold plunge. The water is icy. Your limbs protest. You dunk yourself anyway, because if you leave without doing this, people will whisper. You gasp. You shiver. You pretend it's refreshing. Then you get out quickly because someone just cannonballed it next to you. You towel off with a rough cloth. No fluffy cotton. No hair dryer. Just a sun-dried linen square that smells like yesterday's olive oil. You're clean now. Sort of. Feeling freshish, you collect your belongings, or what's left of them, and leave the bathhouse. Now it's time to tackle another delight of Roman life. Laundry. It's not done at home. It's done at a Falonica, a Roman laundromat run by fullers, who are people brave enough to handle the empire's collective filth. The Falonica is a courtyard full of vats filled with water, lye, and ammonia. The ammonia is urine. Yes, human urine. And where do they get it? From urine pots left on street corners for people to relieve themselves into. These are collected daily and poured into the wash. Why? Because urine contains ammonia, and ammonia breaks down grease and dirt. It's genius. It's disgusting. It's Roman. Your tunic is soaked in this acidic brew, then trampled by barefooted workers until it foams. Then it's rinsed, sometimes scented, and dried on rooftops. You will wear it again tomorrow, and probably the day after that. Let's talk about clothing in general. It's not glamorous. Unless you're rich, it's basic, reused, and often stained with your job, your lunch, or someone else's mistake. The basic outfit is a tunic, a knee-length garment made from wool or linen. In summer, it's itchy. In winter, it's itchy and cold. If you're male and wealthy, you might wear a toga, a large, heavy drape of white wool wrapped around a body in an exhausting ritual that requires instruction, coordination, and zero wind. Togas are formal wear. Impractical. Symbolic. And very good at showing you tripped on the stairs. Women wear stolas, long, layered dresses secured with brooches. Also warm. Also impractical. Also easy to trip on while doing anything. Shoes? If you're lucky, sandals. If not, bare feet on hot stones, cold tiles, and mystery puddles. Accessories? Belt. Maybe a simple brooch. If you're rich, maybe rings. If you're poor, maybe a rope. There's no fast fashion. There's just slow decay. Hair and grooming? Minimalist. Men keep their hair short, practical, low maintenance, and less lice-friendly. Beards come in and out of fashion, depending on the emperor's personal style. If Nero shaves, you shave. If Hadrian grows it out, suddenly everyone's a lumberjack. Women's hair is more elaborate. Braids, buns, pins, and styles that involve help, mirrors, and occasionally scaffolding. If you're wealthy, you have a slave stylist. If you're not, you try your best and hope nobody notices. No shampoo, no conditioner, just water, olive oil, and hope. The daily grind continues. You walk through the city dodging carts, beggars, dogs, and children who scream at each other for fun. The sun is brutal. The shade is rare. Your feet hurt. Your clothes itch. Your soul sags. Someone shouts a prayer to Mars. Someone sells goat intestines on a stick. Someone is arguing about debt in front of a temple. It's noisy. It's dusty. It's everything all at once. And yet, this is normal. You push through. You nod. You endure. Because in ancient Rome, there is no easy. There is only survive today, and maybe tomorrow too. In the next segment, we'll explore Roman housing, how people lived, why buildings collapsed, and what it's like to sleep in a room with no windows, no insulation, and your neighbor's cousin's goat. But for now, dry off. Scrape the olive oil off your shins. Try not to think about the laundry process. You've earned a nap. Sort of. By now your body aches. Your feet are blistered. Your tunic smells like vinegar and old ambition. And your only wish is to return home, collapse somewhere soft, and sleep like a stone in the Tiber. But this is Rome. And home isn't what you think it is. Let's talk about Roman housing. Not villas. Not marble columns and rose gardens. Those belong to senators, generals, and the few people who've never touched their own laundry. You live in an insula. Not the nice kind. Not the corner unit with extra airflow and fewer rats. You live in the kind of building that leans slightly when it rains. The kind built quickly, cheaply, and with more enthusiasm than engineering. An insula is a Roman apartment block, 3 or even 5 stories high, made of wood, brick, plaster, and occasionally denial. They're built tall to conserve space because Rome is crowded and land is expensive. But height doesn't equal luxury. It equals danger. You live on the 3rd floor, which means no plumbing, no heating, no light, and no structural guarantee. The bottom floor? That's for shops and the rich. Stone walls, private courtyards, probably a door that closes properly. The 2nd floor, maybe a craftsman or small merchant. Decent space, small windows, fewer rats. 3rd floor and above, that's you, and several dozen other people. You climb a narrow wooden staircase that creaks with each step. The banister is gone. Someone said it was used for firewood. Someone else said it was never there. You hold your breath as you climb, not because it's a workout, though it is, but because breathing too hard might wake the walls. They're thin. They crack. Sometimes they talk back. You reach your door. It's warped from rain. You jiggle the latch, push it with your shoulder, and stumble into your living space. Welcome home. Your apartment is 1 room, not 1 bedroom. 1 room. It is approximately the size of a modern walk-in closet. If that closet also included 4 humans, 2 chickens, a cooking pot, and a very judgmental cat. There's no bed, just a mat of straw or wool on the floor. Lumpy, damp, possibly sentient. There's no fireplace, no windows, just a small vent near the ceiling that lets in the sound of your neighbors arguing about lentils. The air is stale. The walls are sweating. Someone below is cooking cabbage, and you can feel it in your hair. Your entire family lives here. You, your spouse, your children, maybe an in-law, maybe 2. Everyone sleeps side by side, sometimes in shifts, sometimes not at all. There's a single oil lamp that sputters when you look at it wrong. Your furniture. A crate that doubles as a stool. A jug for water, if you remember to fill it. Basket of dry bread. And a pot in the corner. The pot has one purpose. It's not for soup. You do your business in it. Then, in the morning, you empty it out the window, carefully, with a warning shout. Usually, there is no bathroom. No kitchen. No plumbing. You cook over a brazier, a small charcoal stove that fills the room with smoke and dread. It's dangerous. People die from inhaling fumes. Fires start. Entire insulae go up in flames regularly. You've seen it happen. You've helped form the bucket line. You've watched someone's life turn into ash between 2 prayers. You thank the gods it wasn't yours. This time, the walls are plastered. Kind of. They're cracked. Moldy. Flaking. You once tried to hang a charm for protection, a little figure of a house god made from baked clay. The nails snapped. The plaster crumbled. The charm now sits on the floor, looking mildly offended. And yet, for all its flaws, this space is yours. Kind of. You rent it from a landlord named Flavius who hasn't fixed a leak in 3 seasons but always shows up for the rent. Rent is high. Wages are low. You fall behind 1 month and you're out. No appeal. No deposit refund. No security. Just the street. Or a tenement even higher up the ladder, where the roof leaks and the wind howls through the cracks like a banshee that's disappointed in your life choices. Now, let's say you're lucky. Let's say you have a friend, a stoneworker, who lets you sleep in a room on the ground floor of his workshop. It's dark. It's loud. It smells like marble dust and beer. But it's sturdy, and you sleep better knowing the walls won't tip over in the wind. The trade-off? You wake up every morning to hammering, and someone sharpening chisels 3 feet from your head. Still, it beats the roof caving in during a thunderstorm. By Roman standards, privacy doesn't exist. People live on top of each other, literally. Voices travel. Smells drift. You know too much about your neighbor's digestive health. You learn to tune it out. You learn to sleep through arguments, babies crying, and the occasional goat being coaxed down the stairs. But even if your housing is terrible, and it is, you're still better off than the homeless. Rome has no shelters, no support programs, no safety nets. The poor sleep on stoops, in alleyways, under awnings, or in the forum, pretending to be statues until the guards move them along. Children beg. Mothers barter. Men try not to collapse from exhaustion. And if you die in the street, you're collected quickly, buried cheaply. No ceremony, just a shallow pit and a muttered prayer. At night, you lie down on your mat. Your back cracks like old timber. Your stomach growls. You pray the building doesn't collapse. You pray your neighbor doesn't sing. You pray for a breeze. And then you sleep, lightly, anxiously, wrapped in a blanket that smells like your worst memory. You dream of stone villas, soft pillows, warm lamps. And then you wake up to a mouse chewing your toe. Good morning. In the final segment, we'll look at how Romans died, the funerals, the fears, and the many, many ways the empire tried to end you before you hit 40. But for now, hug your straw mattress, breathe shallowly, and thank the gods that the walls held up. Barely. You made it. Through sponge rituals, gladiator games, bloodletting, fermented mouse dinners, cursed livers, and urine-washed laundry. You survived 1 full day in ancient Rome. Barely. But let's not celebrate just yet. Because in Rome, life isn't just hard. It's fragile. It's temporary. It's a constant negotiation between you and everything trying to kill you. So before you pat yourself on the back with your one clean hand, let's take a gentle stroll through death in ancient Rome, the last thing most Romans ever did. Let's begin with a number. 30. That's the average life expectancy in the empire. And that's if you made it past infancy, which was no small feat. Almost half of all Roman children died before age 10. Disease, malnutrition, accidents, or simply not enough beans. And if you were lucky enough to make it to adulthood, you'd spend the rest of your life dodging war, plague, poison, and roofs that fall on you mid-lunch. So yes, living to 40 was considered an accomplishment. Living past 60 made you a medical miracle. and a little suspicious. When death came, and it did often, the Romans didn't whisper about it. They ritualized it. They talked to it, prepared for it, feared it, mocked it, and sometimes dressed it up with flower crowns and incense. The moment someone died, everything stopped. Literally, the house became impure. You weren't allowed to enter temples. You couldn't perform public duties. You had to purify the home with sulfur and prayers. You had to wash the body, dress it in a toga, even if it didn't fit anymore, and prepare it for the journey to the afterlife. That journey began with a coin. The dead were buried with a small coin in their mouth, hand, or on their eyes, payment for Charon, the mythical ferryman of the underworld, who charged a toll to ferry souls across the river Styx. If you didn't pay, you wandered the earth. Ghost, restless, unwanted, which is why forgetting the coin was a serious offense. You weren't just being cheap. You were dooming grandma to eternal ghosthood. The funeral itself depended on your social status. If you were rich, your funeral was a parade. A procession with musicians, torchbearers, hired mourners, yes, professional criers, and actors wearing wax masks of your ancestors, walking dramatically through the streets in your honor. If you were poor, you got a quick burial. Maybe a neighbor said a prayer. Maybe not. If you had no family at all, your body might end up in a mass grave, or be dumped on the Esquiline Hill, where the city's waste and the forgotten dead mixed freely. It wasn't ideal, but at least it was quiet. Romans were terrified of being forgotten, so they built elaborate tombs, inscribed them with warnings, filled them with statues, offerings, and anything that might help them live forever in memory, or at least get a few compliments from archaeologists centuries later. Tomb inscriptions read like resumes crossed with threats. I lived well. I died well. Don't dig me up, or your goat will die. Graves were placed along roads leading out of the city, so passers-by would see them. Even in death, Romans wanted visibility. Private tomb, good. Decorated urn, better. A pyramid-shaped mausoleum that blocked traffic, perfect. But despite all their rituals, fear lingered. Romans believed in shades, spirits of the dead who might return if offended. They had festivals to appease them, like Paradalia, where families visited graves, left offerings of wine and bread, and hoped their ancestors wouldn't show up angry in the kitchen later that week. You remembered your dead, or they reminded you. Now let's talk disease. Because while Roman doctors were enthusiastic, they were also confused. They believed bad smells caused sickness, so if you were sick, they'd move you to a better smelling room, or burn herbs near your face, or suggest a change in season, diet, or attitude. Plagues swept through cities regularly. Smallpox, tuberculosis, dysentery, malaria, lead poisoning, all traveling merrily through crowded streets, bathhouses, latrines, and love affairs. You might feel fine in the morning and be dead by sunset. Or you might linger, weak and delirious, listening to your cousin debate whether bloodletting again is a good idea. And death wasn't just from illness. It came from the courts, executions for criminals, slaves, and anyone who annoyed an emperor on the wrong day. It came from war, where soldiers marched off for glory and came back in pieces. It came from workplace accidents, especially if you worked with animals, ovens, scaffolding, or other humans. It came from food poisoning, building collapses, fires, floods, superstition, and random violence in alleyways when wine flowed too freely. And always, it came with very little warning. The Romans had a word for the fleeting, brutal nature of life. Memento mori. Remember, you must die. It wasn't meant to depress you. It was meant to focus you. Because if death could arrive at any time, and it could, then every meal mattered. Every prayer. Every walk through the forum. Every stolen fig. You didn't ignore death. You invited it to dinner, toasted it with sour wine, and tried to laugh before it laughed first. By the end of your Roman day, you've witnessed life in all its messy glory. The blood, the sweat, the sponge, the bread, the bureaucracy, the bass, the gods, the ghosts. And now, as the city quiets and the moon reflects off the dusty tiles, you lie on your straw mat in your one-room apartment and think, I made it. For now. You fall asleep to the sound of someone arguing about goat theft. You dream of fish sauce and lead pipes. And somewhere in the darkness, an old Roman poet whispers, life is short, death is certain, but garum, eternal. Thank you for surviving ancient Rome with us. Now go drink some water. Hug your plumbing. Whisper gratitude to your thermostat, because you live in the future, and you would not have lasted a day in ancient Rome. Barely.